The Draconian Warship disappeared on Earth. The Galactic mocked the warning until terror was revealed. The warship Crimson Talon cut through the darkness of space like a blade made of fire and steel. It was one of the finest vessels in the Draconian fleet, armed with weapons that could burn cities to ash and shields that could stop almost any attack. 800 soldiers waited inside its metal walls. They were Draconian warriors, tall reptilian creatures with scales the color of dried blood and eyes like molten gold. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They feared nothing. Commander Vex stood on the bridge and watched the blue planets grow larger on the main screen. Earth, a small world orbiting an average star in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. The humans who lived there had only joined galactic society 50 years ago. They were considered primitive, weak, and unimportant. Such a tiny planet, Vex said. His voice was deep and carried the hiss that all Draconians had when they spoke. It is hard to believe these creatures think they matter. His second officer, a female Draconian named Syrah, checked her instruments. Our scans show basic technology, nuclear power, chemical rockets, some early energy weapons. Nothing that could threaten us. Vex made a sound of contempt. Of course not. The High Command wants information about their military capacity before we decide if they are worth conquering, though I suspect there is little to learn. The Crimson Talon had not announced its arrival. The Draconians saw no need to follow diplomatic protocols with such a lesser species. They would scan the planet, observe the humans, and report back. If the humans noticed them, it would not matter. What could they do? The ship entered the solar system and passed the outer planets. Jupiter and Saturn were gas giants of no interest. Mars was a dead rock. Earth grew closer, and Vex could see the swirling white clouds and deep blue oceans that covered its surface. Engage the cloaking field, he ordered. We will observe them without being seen. The ship shimmered and vanished from sight. Even the most advanced sensors would have trouble finding them now. The Crimson Talon descended toward Earth, entering the atmosphere over a vast ocean that the humans called the Pacific. The first hour passed without incident. The Draconians scanned cities, military bases, and communication networks. Everything confirmed what they already believed. Humans were primitive. Their weapons were laughable. Their defenses were weak. Conquering this world would take days, not weeks. Then the instruments began to act strangely. Sarah frowned at her console. Commander, I am getting unusual readings from the ocean below us. Vex walked to her station. What kind of readings? I am not certain. There appears to be movement in the deep water. Something very large. She adjusted the sensors. The depth here is over 10,000 meters. Whatever it is rising toward the surface. Vex felt the first small touch of unease, but he pushed it away. Some kind of sea creature. This planet has many large animals. Commander, the object is too large to be an animal. It is nearly 2 kilometers in length. Syrah's voice had changed. There was fear in it now, and it is rising fast. Before Vex could respond, the ship shook. Alarms began to scream throughout the vessel. Red lights flashed on every console. We have lost the cloaking field, an officer shouted. Primary power is fluctuating. Shields are failing, another voice called out. I do not understand. Nothing is attacking us. Vex gripped the railing of the command platform. Get us out of the atmosphere now. The pilot worked frantically at the controls. The engines are not responding. Something is interfering with our systems. On the main screen, the ocean below them began to churn. Waves formed in circles, spreading outward from a central point. The water rose like a mountain being born from the sea. And in that rising water, Vex saw something that made his ancient warrior blood turn cold. Eyes. Vast yellow eyes, each one larger than the Crimson Talon itself. They looked up at the warship with an intelligence that was not animal. It was something else. Something that had existed long before the Draconians had learned to make fire. Open fire, Vex commanded. All weapons. The ship's guns blazed. Plasma bolts and laser beams struck the water, turning it to steam. But the eyes did not blink. The thing beneath the waves did not slow. Tentacles rose from the ocean. They were black as the void between stars and covered in patterns that seemed to shift and move. Each tentacle was thick enough to wrap around the entire warship. They reached up toward the Crimson Talon with terrible patience. Soldiers began to scream. Some fired their personal weapons at the walls, at shadows, at each other. Vex saw warriors who had fought in a dozen campaigns fall to their knees and weep like children. Something was inside their minds. Something was showing them truths that reptilian brains were not meant to hold. Sarah grabbed Vex's arm. Her golden eyes were wide with madness. It is old, she whispered. It was here before the first star burned. It will be here after the last star dies. And it is hungry. The tentacles wrapped around the Crimson Talon. Metal screamed and tore. The ship began to descend toward the black water below. Vex managed to reach the communication console. He had to send a warning. The Draconian Empire had to know what lived on this small blue world. His claws moved across the controls, opening a channel to the High Command. This is Commander Vex of the Crimson Talon, he said. His voice was steady, even as the ship broke apart around him. Do not send ships to Earth. Do not come here. There is something in the water, something in the darkness. The humans did not fight us. They did not need to. This planet is guarded by the transmission ended in static and screaming. The Crimson Talon was pulled beneath the waves. The ocean closed over it like a mouth swallowing prey. Within minutes, the surface was calm again. There was no wreckage, no body, no evidence that a Draconian warship had ever been there. 3 days later, the Draconian High Command received the partial transmission. They listened to the screams of their finest warriors. They watched the sensor data that showed impossible things rising from the deep. And then they did what all Draconians did when they were hurt. They demanded vengeance. Ambassador Rix of the Draconian Empire stood before the Galactic Council with fury in his eyes. The humans have destroyed one of our vessels, he declared. They have killed 800 of our warriors. We demand justice. The council chamber was filled with representatives from 100 species. They watched with interest as the Draconian made his accusations. Humanity was new to galactic politics. This was the most attention they had ever received. Director Chen, the human ambassador, rose from her seat. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes. She did not look afraid of the giant reptile threatening her species. No human weapon was deployed against your vessel, she said simply. We did not attack the Crimson Talon. Ambassador Rix hissed with anger, then explained what happened to it. Director Chen was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft but carried throughout the chamber. Your ship entered our atmosphere without permission. We warned the galaxy when we first made contact. We told everyone the same thing. Do not come to Earth without invitation. Do not enter our waters. Do not go into the dark places. The Draconian laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. You think we are afraid of your weak warnings? No, Director Chen said. I think you should be, but I know you are not. That is why I will say it again, for everyone to hear. Do not send ships to Earth, not unless we invite you. What lives on our world does not distinguish between friends and enemies. It only knows those who have permission and those who do not. The council chamber erupted in laughter. 100 species looked at this tiny human woman and saw only arrogance and delusion. The Draconians were one of the great powers of the galaxy, and this primitive creature thought she could threaten them. Director Chen did not argue. She did not explain. She simply gathered her materials and prepared to leave. We warned you, she said quietly. Remember that. Nobody listened. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. The mighty Draconian Empire had lost a warship, and they blamed the primitive humans of Earth. Most species found this claim ridiculous. How could a backward world destroy one of the most powerful vessels in the known galaxy? In the halls of the Galactic Council, humanity became a joke. Ambassador Trell of the Vorthin Collective was the first to openly mock Director Chen. The Vorthins were tall, thin beings with pale blue skin and too many eyes. They considered themselves among the most intelligent species in existence. Perhaps the humans threw rocks at the Draconian ship, Trell said during a council session. His multiple eyes blinked with amusement. Or maybe they used those primitive chemical explosives they are so fond of. What do they call them? Bombs? Laughter rippled through the chamber. Director Chen sat quietly in his seat, her face showing nothing. Ambassador Crix of the metallic swarm joined in. The swarm were insectoid beings who communicated through rapid clicking sounds. Our analysis suggests the Draconian vessel suffered a mechanical failure. They are simply using the humans as an excuse to justify military action. It is a common tactic among aggressive species. The humans are harmless, declared Ambassador Yala of the Peaceful Ones, a species of gentle floating creatures who had never fought a war. We visited their planet decades ago. They are violent among themselves. Yes, but they pose no threat to spacefaring civilizations. The Draconians are lying. Director Chen raised her hand to speak. The chamber gradually fell silent, though many representatives wore expressions of amusement. I will say this once more, she began. The Draconian warship was not destroyed by human weapons. We did not attack it. But something on our world did. Earth is not what you think it is. There are things living there that are older than your civilizations, older than most stars. They do not like uninvited guests. The laughter that followed was even louder than before. Ambassador Rix of the Draconian Empire slammed his clawed fist on his podium. Enough of these fairy tales. The humans are trying to frighten us with stories of monsters. It is pathetic. The Draconian Empire demands the right to send an investigative fleet to Earth. We will discover the truth ourselves. I advise against this, Director Chen said. Her voice remained calm, but there was something in her eyes that a careful observer might have called sadness. Please, do not send more ships. Is that a threat? Rix demanded. It is a warning. The same warning we gave when we first contacted the galaxy. The same warning I have given at every council meeting since this began. Director Chen stood and looked around the chamber at all the alien faces watching her. Earth is protected. Not by us. Not by our weapons or our armies. By things that were ancient when your ancestors were still learning to breathe air. If you do not believe me, ask yourselves this. Why did 800 Draconian warriors, soldiers who had conquered worlds, die screaming? For a moment, there was silence. Then Ambassador Trell made a dismissive gesture with his long fingers. Human mythology. Every primitive species has legends of monsters. The Draconians died because of a malfunction or a weapon we do not yet understand, nothing more. The council voted. By an overwhelming majority, they approved the Draconian request to send an investigative fleet to Earth. Human objections were noted and ignored. Director Chen did not argue further. She simply nodded and returned to her seat. In the weeks that followed, humanity's few allies quietly distanced themselves. The Githoni, a species of traders who had always dealt fairly with Earth, stopped responding to communications. The luminous beings, who had once praised human art and music, issued a statement expressing disappointment in human arrogance. Even the neutral species seemed embarrassed by humanity's claims. Director Chen received messages from her government on Earth. They asked if there was anything more she could do. She told them the truth. The galaxy did not believe. It would not believe until it saw. And seeing, she knew, would cost many lives. A coalition of minor species approached the Draconian Empire with an offer. They would send observation vessels alongside the Draconian fleet. This way, the whole galaxy could witness the truth about Earth. The Draconians agreed. They wanted witnesses when they exposed human lies. 6 species joined the expedition. The insectoid swarm sent to scout ships. The Vorthams contributed a science vessel packed with sensors and recording equipment. The crystalline entity, beings made of living rock, provided a mining ship that doubled as a warship. 3 other species added observation craft. In total, 18 vessels would travel to Earth, 12 Draconian warships, and 6 observer vessels from other species. On the day the fleet departed, Ambassador Zrix made a speech to the council. When we return, he declared, we will have proof of human deception. We will show the galaxy that there are no monsters on Earth, only liars. Director Chen requested permission to make a final statement. It was granted with barely concealed impatience. She stood and looked at the assembled representatives one last time. I have done everything I can to prevent this. I have warned you in every way I know how. What happens next is not our responsibility. We asked you not to come. We begged you to listen. You chose not to. More threats. Zrix laughed. Save them, human. We will see you soon. And when we return, your species will answer for its lies. Director Chen shook her head slowly. You will not return, Ambassador. None of them will. And when the galaxy finally understands why, I hope you remember that we tried to save you. She left the chamber without looking back. The fleet traveled for 3 weeks through hyperspace. During the journey, the crew members talked among themselves. They shared jokes about human foolishness. They discussed what they expected to find on Earth. Some believed they would discover a hidden weapon, perhaps stolen technology from another species. Others thought the humans had simply gotten lucky and the Draconian ship had suffered an accident. A few whispered darker theories about Draconian competence. Don't bodies seriously believe there were monsters. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. The blue planet hung in the distance, beautiful and small. The Draconian commander, a veteran named Admiral Kreth, ordered the ships into formation. All vessels maintain combat readiness, he announced over the fleet communication channel. We do not expect resistance, but we will be prepared for it. Science vessels, begin your scans. Warships, provide escort formation. The observer ships activated their recording equipment. Everything that happened would be broadcast across the galaxy. Billions of beings on thousands of worlds would witness the truth about Earth. The fleet moved toward the planet. They passed Mars, red and dead. They passed Earth's single large moon. They entered orbit around the blue world. Scans show extensive civilization across the surface, an officer reported. Cities, infrastructure, communication networks, all consistent with a primitive technological species. No evidence of advanced weapons or defensive systems. Admiral Kreth felt satisfaction, just as they expected. The humans had been bluffing. Begin atmospheric entry, he commanded. Spread out across the planet. Find the Crimson Talon's wreckage. Find proof of what these creatures did. 18 ships descended through the clouds. For the first hour, everything seemed normal. The ships fanned out across the globe, scanning land and sea. They detected human aircraft watching them from a distance, but no weapons were fired. The humans made no attempt to communicate. Then the problems began. A Draconian cruiser over the Atlantic Ocean reported navigation errors. Its instruments showed it moving in circles even when the crew could see they were flying straight. Another ship over the Pacific said their sensors were detecting massive objects in the deep water, objects that disappeared when they tried to focus on them. The Vorthan science vessel recorded strange energy readings that matched no known phenomenon. The patterns seemed almost like language. They reported, but in frequencies that hurt to analyze. As the sun set over Earth, the reports grew more disturbing. Crew members on multiple ships claimed to hear voices, whispers in corridors that should be empty, words in languages that did not exist. Some said they saw shadows moving in corners, shapes that were there one moment and gone the next. A crystalline entity vessel went silent. No distress signal, no explanation. It was simply there one moment and gone the next. Admiral Kreth ordered all ships to regroup. Something was wrong. He did not know what. but the feeling in his ancient warrior bones told him they had made a terrible mistake. Before the fleet could reform, the screaming began. The screaming came from everywhere at once. Admiral Kreth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Flame, as reports flooded in from across the fleet. Crew members were losing their minds. Soldiers who had fought in 100 battles were crying like hatchlings. Officers were giving orders that made no sense, and the voices kept coming through the communication channels. "There is something in the walls," a Draconian captain reported, his voice shaking. "We can hear it moving, we can hear it breathing, but when we look, there is nothing there. Our sensors show a shape beneath the ship." Another officer screamed, "It is the size of a city. It is rising. Emperor, help us. It is rising." The Vorthan science vessel sent a transmission that was barely coherent. "The readings are impossible. The energy signatures predate the formation of this planet, predate this solar system. These things are not from Earth. They were here before Earth existed. They were waiting. They have always been waiting." Admiral Kreth tried to maintain control. He had commanded fleets in the most dangerous regions of the galaxy. He had faced enemies that could destroy planets, but nothing had prepared him for this. "All ships return to orbit," he commanded. "Emergency ascent. Get us out of the atmosphere." The engines of the Eternal Flame roared to life. The massive warship began to climb toward the safety of space. For a moment, Kreth allowed himself to hope. Then the lights went out. Emergency power flickered on, casting red shadows across the bridge. The main screen showed only static. The engines continued to fire, but the ship was not rising anymore. Something was holding them in place. Admiral and officer whispered, "Look outside." Kreth moved to a viewport and stared into the darkness. At first, he saw nothing but clouds and the distant lights of a human city. Then he saw the eyes. They were everywhere, vast and glowing, surrounding the ship from all sides. Some were the yellow of ancient gold. Others burned with colors that had no name, colors that should not exist. They watched the Eternal Flame with an attention that was more than animal, more than intelligent. It was something else entirely. And then they began to close in. Across the planet, similar scenes played out on every vessel. The swarm scout ships tried to flee together, their insectoid pilots working in perfect coordination. They almost reached the edge of the atmosphere before tentacles of living shadow wrapped around them and pulled them back down. The last transmission from the lead ship showed something pressing against their hull from outside, something with too many limbs and mouths that opened into darkness without end. The Vorthan science vessel continued broadcasting until the very end. Their multiple eyes recorded everything. They saw creatures rising from the ocean that made the largest whales look like insects. They saw shapes descending from the clouds that had no fixed form. Things that changed and shifted and wore different faces every second. They saw the truth about Earth, and they screamed it into the void even as their ship was torn apart. "They are real," the Vorthan captain gasped. That humans were telling the truth. "These things are older than time. They live in the spaces between. They feed on fear, and we have given them so much to eat." The broadcast ended with a sound like reality itself being torn open. Admiral Kreth watched his fleet die. One by one, the ships went silent. Some were dragged into the ocean. Others were pulled into the clouds. A few simply vanished, as if they had never existed at all. On the bridge of the Eternal Flame, his crew had stopped fighting. They sat at their stations, staring at nothing, their minds broken by what they had seen. A few still whispered prayers to gods that could not hear them. Kreth felt something brush against his thoughts. It was not a voice. It was older than language, older than sound. It was a presence that filled his mind with images and sensations. He saw Earth as it was before humans. He saw creatures living in the depths of primordial oceans, waiting in the darkness beneath volcanic mountains, sleeping in the spaces between worlds. They were not from this universe. They had come from somewhere else, somewhere outside, and they had made Earth their home long before life crawled from the seas. He saw humans emerging, small and fragile and full of fear. He saw the first encounters between humanity and the things in the dark. He saw the terror, the worship, the long centuries of learning. Humans had not conquered these beings. They had not even tried. They had simply learned to live alongside them, to ask permission, to show respect. The humans called them by many names. Old ones, ancient ones, those who sleep, the things in the deep places. But names did not matter. What mattered was that Earth belonged to them, and anyone who came without invitation was food. Kreth understood now why Director Chen had tried so hard to warn them. The humans were not lying. They were not arrogant. They were terrified. They had lived their entire history in the shadow of beings that could destroy civilizations without effort. They had survived only because they learned humility. And the Draconians in their pride had refused to listen. A tentacle crashed through the view. It was black and cold and covered in patterns that moved like living things. Kreth did not run. There was nowhere to go. He simply stood and watched as the end came for him. "Tell them," he whispered, though he did not know if anyone could hear. "Tell the galaxy we were wrong." The Eternal Flame was pulled into the Pacific Ocean. Water crushed the hull like paper. Kreth had one final glimpse of something vast and terrible waiting below, a shape that seemed to fill the entire ocean. And then there was nothing. Silence fell over. Earth, the observation vessels had managed to send some of their recordings before they were destroyed. Fragments of video, pieces of sensor data, broken transmissions filled with screaming and impossible images. These fragments reached the Galactic Council within hours. The representatives watched in horror as Draconian warships were pulled into the sea by things that should not exist. They saw creatures rising from the clouds that defied the laws of physics. They've heard the final words of Warthon scientists, beings known for their cold rationality, screaming about elder gods and cosmic horrors. The laughter stopped. Ambassador Trell of the Vorthon Collective was the first to break the silence. His multiple eyes were wide with fear. "What have we done?" he whispered. "We sent our people to die. We sent them to a planet guarded by nightmares." Other ambassadors looked at the empty seat where the Draconian representative had sat. Ambassador Rix had been on the flagship. He was gone now, along with 8,000 other beings who had refused to believe human warnings. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Species that had mocked humanity now demanded answers. Species that had called Director Chen a liar now wanted to know how humans had survived on a world filled with such horrors. A message arrived from Earth. It was Director Chen. She stood before the camera with the same calm expression she had always worn. Behind her, through a window, the ocean was visible, peaceful, beautiful, hiding unimaginable terrors in its depths. "I warned you," she said softly. "I warned you many times. You did not listen. Now you understand why. We ask again, for what I hope is the final time. Do not come to Earth without invitation. Do not enter our waters. Do not go into the dark places. The things that live here do not care about your empires or your weapons. They were ancient when the first stars were born. They will be here long after the last star dies. We have learned to share our world with them. We hope you can learn to respect that." The transmission ended. For the first time in its long history, the Galactic Council had nothing to say. The Galactic Council demanded an emergency session with Director Chen. For the first time since humanity joined galactic civilization, every species sent their highest-ranking representatives. There were no empty seats, no absent ambassadors. The chamber was filled with beings who had spent decades dismissing humanity as primitive and weak. Now they looked at the human ambassador with new eyes, eyes filled with fear. Director Chen arrived without guards or assistants. She walked alone to the central speaking platform and looked at the assembled aliens with the same calm expression she always wore. "You have questions," she said simply. "We have many questions," replied the new Draconian ambassador, a younger male named Solus who had been appointed after Ambassador Rix's death. His voice was tight with controlled emotion. "We have lost 12 warships, 8,000 warriors, our greatest admiral. We deserve answers." "You deserve nothing," Director Chen said quietly. "But I will give you answers anyway, because we do not want this to happen again." The chamber was silent. No one had ever heard a human speak to the Draconian Empire with such directness. Director Chen activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air above the speaking platform. They showed Earth at different points in its history. Ancient oceans, volcanic landscapes, the slow emergence of life. 4 billion years ago, Earth was a young planet, hot, violent, covered in molten rock and poisonous gases. But it was not empty. Something had already made it home. The images shifted to show strange shapes moving in primordial seas, things with too many limbs, things with bodies that seemed to exist in more dimensions than normal matter allowed, things that watched the universe with ancient, patient eyes. "We do not know where they came from," Director Chen continued. "Perhaps they were born in the spaces between galaxies. Perhaps they fell from dimensions that exist parallel to our own. Perhaps they were here before the universe itself existed, waiting in the void for matter to form around them. What we know is this: they chose Earth. They made it their territory. And when life began to evolve, they watched." "Why did they not destroy your ancestors?" the Vorthon representative asked. "Why allow humans to exist at all?" "Because we are useful," Director Chen said, "and because we learned to be respectful." She showed new images, cave paintings from ancient human history, drawings of vast creatures rising from the sea, carvings of shapes that seemed to move even when frozen in stone. "Our earliest ancestors knew about the things in the dark. Every human culture has legends of monsters in the deep places, sea serpents, old gods, creatures that came from beyond the stars. These were not myths. There were warnings passed down through generations, warnings about what lived alongside us. How did humanity survive?" Ambassador Solus demanded. "Your species is fragile. You have no natural weapons, no armor. How did you not go extinct?" Director Chen smiled slightly. It was a tired smile, the expression of someone carrying a very old burden. "We learned to ask permission. The earliest human settlements avoided certain places, mountains where the ground hummed with strange energy, caves that went deeper than any cave should, stretches of ocean where ships disappeared and swimmers never returned. We learned which territories belonged to us and which belonged to them. And when humans made mistakes," the swarm ambassador clicked nervously, "when they entered forbidden places, they died. Or worse." Director Chen's voice was flat. There are fates worse than death when you attract the attention of beings who exist partially outside normal reality. Our ancestors learned this through terrible experience. Villages that went mad overnight, cities swallowed by the earth, entire populations that simply vanished, leaving behind only empty buildings and the smell of the deep ocean. The images showed more ancient art, rituals performed at the edge of dark water, offerings left at the entrances to forbidden caves, humans bowing before shapes that towered above them like living mountains. We learned to communicate, Director Chen explained, not with words at first, with actions, with offerings, with respect. We showed them that we understood our place. We were guests on their world, and we would behave as guests should. In return, they tolerated our presence. Some of them even began to appreciate us. Appreciate, a representative gasped. We are interesting to them, Director Chen said. We create art. We tell stories. We dream in ways that they find fascinating. Some of the beings have watched humanity for thousands of years, curious about our strange little minds. They protect us the way a collector might protect rare specimens, and your modern civilization. The Vorthan ambassador pressed. You have nuclear weapons, spacecraft, advanced technology. Surely you have tried to fight them, to free yourselves. Director Chen laughed. It was not a happy sound. We are not prisoners. We are partners. Humanity long ago accepted that we share our world with beings far more powerful than us. This is not slavery. It is wisdom. We do not try to fight things that could destroy our entire species with a thought. We coexist. We ask permission before we drill deep into the earth or explore the deepest parts of the ocean. We warn them before we test new weapons or launch new spacecraft. And in return, they protect us from external threats. They protect you, Ambassador Solus repeated slowly. Yes, Earth belongs to them. Anything that threatens Earth threatens their territory. When your warship entered our atmosphere without permission, it was not attacking humanity. It was invading their home. They responded as they always respond to invaders. The chamber was utterly silent. The implications were beginning to sink in. Your planet is guarded by ancient gods, the Vorthan ambassador said weakly. Not gods, Director Chen corrected. Something older than the concept of gods. Something that existed before worship or prayer or religion. They are what they are, and we have learned to live with them. Can you control them? Ambassador Solus asked. There was desperation in his voice. Can you tell them not to attack us? Director Chen shook her head. We cannot control them. We can only communicate, ask, suggest. Sometimes they listen. Sometimes they do not. They are not our weapons or our servants. They are our neighbors. Very large, very old, very dangerous neighbors. She deactivated the holographic display and looked around the chamber. You came to Earth without permission. You ignored our warnings. You paid the price. I am sorry for the lives lost. We did try to prevent this, but we will not apologize for the nature of our world. What do you want? The Swarm Ambassador asked. I want you to understand, Director Chen said. Humanity is not primitive or weak. We are survivors. We have lived for 200,000 years on a planet that would kill most species within a generation. We walk on ground that covers sleeping nightmares. We sail on oceans that hide horrors beyond imagination. We look up at mountains that contain beings older than your civilizations. And we survive because we learned humility. She let that sink in before continuing. I want you to spread this understanding across the galaxy. Tell every species, every empire, every civilization, Earth is not a planet to be conquered or explored or studied. It is a territory claimed by forces that could destroy fleets with a thought. Humanity is not the master of that territory. We are the ones who know how to ask for safe passage. And if we want to trade, a small species representative asked hopefully, to communicate, to visit peacefully, then you ask us first, Director Chen said. We will communicate with our neighbors. We will request permission. If they agree, you may visit designated safe zones. If they do not agree, you stay away. This is how it has always worked. This is how it will always work. Ambassador Solus stood slowly. His scales had lost their aggressive color, fading to the pale shade of submission. The Draconian Empire withdraws its demands for reparations. We acknowledge that our warriors died due to our own arrogance. We apologize for not heeding human warnings. Other species quickly added their own statements of understanding. The mockery of previous sessions was completely forgotten. No one was laughing now. Director Chen accepted their words with grace, but as she prepared to leave, she paused. There is one more thing you should know. The beings on Earth are not unique. There are others like them scattered across the galaxy, in the cores of dead stars, in the spaces between dimensions, in places you have not yet explored. Humanity learned about them because we had no choice. You have been lucky. Most spacefaring species never encounter such beings. But luck does not last forever. She looked around the chamber one final time. Learn from us. When you find places that feel wrong, when your instruments show impossible readings, when your crews report whispers and shadows and dreams of hungry darkness, listen to those warnings. Some territories are not meant to be claimed. Some questions are not meant to be answered. Some sleepers are not meant to be awakened. Director Chen walked out of the chamber, leaving behind a room full of very frightened beings. In the months that followed Director Chen's revelation, the galaxy changed. Species that had spent centuries conquering and expanding suddenly became cautious. Exploration fleets moved more carefully through unknown space. Colonies were established only after thorough surveys confirmed no unusual energy readings or unexplained phenomena. The aggressive expansion that had defined galactic civilization slowed to a careful crawl. Earth became the most respected planet in known space, not because of human technology or military power, because of what lived there and what humanity had learned to do. Director Chen received requests from dozens of species. They all wanted the same thing. They wanted to understand how humans had survived, how they had learned to communicate with beings beyond normal comprehension, how they had turned potential destroyers into protectors. She agreed to share what she could. Human scientists traveled to the Galactic Council to give lectures on the history of human-entity relations. They explained the rituals that had evolved over thousands of years, the careful diplomacy that happened in the deepest parts of the ocean and the darkest caves, the language of offerings and respect that humans had developed to communicate with minds that thought in dimensions beyond human understanding. The galaxy listened with fear and fascination. The key is humility, a human historian explained to a packed council chamber. Our ancestors made many mistakes. They tried to fight the entities. They tried to trap them or trick them or drive them away. Every attempt failed, often with terrible consequences. The settlements that survived were the ones that accepted reality. You cannot defeat something that exists partially outside normal space and time. You can only learn to coexist. How do you communicate with them? A young Draconian diplomat asked. Ambassador Solus had retired in disgrace, and new representatives had taken his place. Representatives who treated humans with careful respect. Slowly, the historian replied, and carefully. Some of the entities have learned human languages over the millennia. They find them amusing. Others communicate through dreams and visions. A few use methods that are difficult to describe. Direct transmission of concepts and emotions into human minds. It took our species thousands of years to develop translators who could handle such communication without losing their sanity. You have people who talk to these things, the Vorthan ambassador asked incredulously. We have people who listen. Talking is less common. The entities rarely care about human opinions, but they will sometimes respond to requests, especially if those requests involve protecting their territory. The historian showed images of deep-sea facilities built by human governments. Structures at the bottom of ocean trenches where specially trained diplomats waited in the darkness, sending carefully composed messages into the void and hoping for responses. When your fleet approached Earth, the historian continued, we sent urgent requests to our neighbors. We asked them to show restraint, to allow the ships to leave peacefully. We begged them to remember that the aliens did not understand what they were doing. They did not listen, Ambassador Solus's replacement said quietly. Some of them listened. The destruction could have been much worse. There are entities sleeping beneath Earth's crust that could crack the planet in half if they awoke in anger. There are beings in the deep ocean that could drain the life from every creature on the surface with a thought. These did not wait. They did not act, because we asked them not to. The chamber was silent as the implications sank in. What rose to destroy the fleet was some of the younger entities, the ones who are more active, more curious, more hungry. Even they showed some restraint. They could have followed the ships into space. They could have spread beyond Earth to attack your homeworlds. They did not, because we asked them to stay. You saved us, the Vorthan ambassador whispered. We tried to save everyone. The historian said sadly. We tried to save your people too. We warned you not to come. You did not listen. In the following years, Earth's status continued to evolve. Other species began formal diplomatic relations with humanity, but these relations were unlike any that had come before. Trade ships requested permission before entering Earth's solar system. Diplomatic envoys submitted their travel plans months in advance so humans could negotiate safe passage with their neighbors. Some species sent scholars to study human religion and mythology, hoping to understand the entities better. They found that almost every human culture had stories about the things in the dark, sea monsters, underground demons, gods that slept beneath mountains or stars. These were not fantasies. They were survival guides passed down through generations to help humanity remember the boundaries that must not be crossed. The Draconians were the first species to formally apologize to humanity. In a ceremony broadcast across the galaxy, the new Draconian Emperor bowed before Director Chen and asked forgiveness for the arrogance of his predecessors. We called you primitive, the Emperor said. We thought you were weak because you did not conquer your world. We understand now that you showed wisdom we did not possess. You learned to share your home with beings far greater than yourselves. This is not weakness. It is strength of a kind we never imagined. Director Chen accepted the apology with grace. We do not blame you for your ignorance, she replied. We blame ourselves for not finding better ways to make you understand. Perhaps if we had shown you the truth earlier, your people would not have died. You tried to warn us, the Emperor acknowledged. We chose not to listen. That was our failure, not yours. A new era began for humanity. They were no longer seen as primitive newcomers to the galactic stage. They were recognized as survivors of something that would have destroyed most species. Their homeworld was treated with the same caution that others gave to black holes or unstable stars, beautiful and fascinating from a distance, deadly beyond measure up close. Some species asked if humans would help them deal with similar entities that existed in their own territories, unexplored regions of space where ships disappeared, ancient planets where colonizers went mad, places that felt wrong in ways that defied explanation. Humanity agreed to help when they could. Human diplomats traveled to distant worlds to teach the arts of coexistence. They showed other species how to recognize the signs of entity presence, how to communicate respect without provoking attack, how to survive in a universe where not everything could be conquered or controlled. Not all of these missions succeeded. Some entities had no interest in communication. Some had been sleeping peacefully until colonizers woke them with noise and activity. In these cases, humans could only advise evacuation and hope the affected species listened better than the Draconians had. Years later, Director Chen gave her final address to the Galactic Council before retiring. "When I first came to this chamber," she said, "humanity was a joke. You laughed at our warnings. You dismissed our caution as primitive superstition. You believed that technology and weapons could overcome any obstacle." She looked around at the assembled representatives. Many of them had been there on the day of the mockery. They did not laugh now. The galaxy has learned a difficult lesson. There are things in this universe that are beyond our understanding, beyond our control, beyond our ability to fight or overcome. The only path to survival is acceptance, humility, respect for forces greater than ourselves. Humanity learned this lesson early, because we had no choice. We were born on a world where nightmares walked beside us. We evolved in the shadow of beings that could end our existence without effort, and because of this, we developed wisdom that other species had to earn through tragedy. She paused, choosing her final words carefully. "I hope the galaxy remembers what it has learned. I hope future generations never forget that conquest is not always possible, that some territories must be respected, not claimed, that there are sleepers in the darkness who must not be awakened." Director Chen smiled slightly. It was the smile of someone who had carried a heavy burden for a long time and was finally setting it down. Humanity will continue to live, as we always have, carefully, respectfully, sharing our world with beings we cannot understand but have learned to appreciate. Perhaps one day, the rest of the galaxy will learn to do the same. She stepped down from the platform and walked toward the exit. But before she left, a young Draconian diplomat approached her. "Director Chen," he said hesitantly, "I have one last question. How did humanity first learn to speak with the Ancient Ones? How did it all begin?" Director Chen looked at him with old, wise eyes. "We listened," she said simply. "Before we tried to talk, we listened. We paid attention to the world around us. We noticed where the shadows moved wrong and where the water held secrets. We observed, we learned, and only after generations of listening did we dare to speak." The Draconian nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his golden eyes. "Perhaps that is what the galaxy needs to learn," he said quietly. "To listen before speaking, to observe before acting, to show humility before demanding respect." Director Chen placed a weathered hand on his arm. "Now you begin to understand," she said gently. "This is how survival starts." She walked out of the council chamber for the last time, leaving behind a galaxy that had finally learned to listen.